Welcome, my sisters, to Black Women Talking Back podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Aleese, and I have the immense privilege of sitting down with the Black, brilliant, and beautiful Dr. Kristee Haggins. Dr. Kristee is a community healer, an African centered psychologist, consultant, and professor who takes a holistic approach to healing mind, body, spirit, and community. Dr. Kristee is the executive director and founder of Safe Black Space, a nonprofit organization focused on helping Black people heal and thrive in the face of racism and anti-Blackness. She is an associate professor in the College of Psychology at California North State University and president of the Greater Sacramento chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. Wow. Before you talk about all the wonderful things you do, I'd like for you to share with us a little bit about who you are. Not so much, because we're going to talk about, this whole podcast is going to be about the incredible things you do to make this world, and especially the Black world, a better place. But tell us a little bit more about who you are in terms of how you manifest life in this time, in this world. Welcome, Dr. Kristee.
Well, thank you for having me, Elise. It is good to be here. I will just start by saying my name is Kristee Haggins. In community, I am frequently referred to as Dr. Kristee. I currently reside in the Sacramento region. I am a Black woman who is proud of who she is, where she came from, what she's about, and our people and our community. And so I'm sure as we continue the conversation, you'll get a chance to understand a little bit more about what that means. But I hail originally from Altadena, from Pasadena, from Southern California, and now live in the Sacramento area. And it's good to be here with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'll throw a little piece in there and say that just so our listeners are ready, they won't be
Mhm.
surprised, though surprises are nice, that you're a deeply spiritual and grounded person.
Mhm.
And from what I've seen, you show up in that way all day, every day.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's not something I necessarily lead with as a description of who I am. It's
Mhm.
just how I show up, as you just said, in the world that I grew up actually going to Christian schools, private Christian schools, all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. And yet, many of the beliefs and some of the expectations around organized religion for me didn't fit as I have gotten older and more mature. And so there's much more of a spiritual connection that I feel, ancestral connection to what's the reality of life as I live it right now.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yes, and I'm sure that our listeners will experience that even though they'll be listening to an audio recording. Confident that they will still have that experience, even through the recording. So let's get it going. So
Let's go.
tell us, how did you, why did you, how did you choose psychology?
That's a great question. So, as a youngster, I always thought that I would become a pediatrician. Somehow, from the messages my parents gave me, my mom in particular, I was going to be a medical doctor, and I love children, so I thought that was my path. But in reality, as I got to college and was going through the experience, within my first year of taking biology classes and physics, and I was like, "I do not like this. I do not understand this. This is not a path for me," and really found myself, floundering for a bit in terms of considering what I wanted to major in. And I remember taking my first intro to psychology class and being like, "Wow, how interesting this is." To get a sense of who people are, why they do what they do, to begin to unpack a little bit of some of my own experiences as well. And to be quite honest, as a young person, as a teenager, and in my early college years and young adulthood, I really struggled. I wouldn't have defined it at the time, but with depression, some level as well of anxiety, social anxiety, and experienced some challenges in my life that brought me to attempt suicide. And as that was a lived experience of mine, and as I got introduced to the field of psychology, it was this connection for me of beginning my own healing journey and realizing, dang, I want to provide this to other folks who look like me, who may be going through experiences like me, who may not recognize that they're valuable and they're worthy, and that there's things that they can do to help them heal and to thrive. Um, and that was a big part of my decision, again, as a college student, to say, this is the path I want to take.
Excellent. Excellent. It's so normal to, start off in undergrad and think you know exactly where you're going and what you're going to do, and
Mhm.
find yourself changing horses in the middle stream. And especially I think if you're a person who is in any way spiritual, in any way trying to know have a deeper understanding of who you are, and why you are, whatever whatever we came to, whatever baggage we arrived at undergrad with, where it came from our parents or our
Right.
high school teachers or whatever, a lot of that is thrown to the wayside. And or at least I think a lot of people want to. I know I've talked to a lot of young people in college. My daughter's in her 20s, and so all her friends. And I recall so many heartbreaking struggles.
Mhm.
Their conversations about feeling that the track that they were on was not for them,
Mhm.
but also the fear of disappointing their parents.
Yeah.
Um, and the fear of, oh, what if I don't follow this mainstream kind of
Mhm.
trajectory? So all those, and as a result, so many young folk are in undergraduate struggling with mental health challenges that are grounded in just that very thing, being in a place where they don't feel welcome, on a track where they don't feel they really connect with, and then the fear of making another decision, of
Yeah.
changing. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so I am glad that you are, powerful enough
Mhm.
to tell yourself, "This is not for me, and I'm gonna change horses in the middle of the stream."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things that also makes me want to just co-sign, as they say, right? Or just align with what you were saying is, for almost 20 years, actually, I worked as a psychologist in a university counseling center, actually at UC Davis, and so had a number of years and opportunities to work with students, to work primarily and really focus with Black students around their experiences. And much of what you were just describing is a real lived experience that many of our youth are dealing with, whether, again, if they're in college or not, but just that whole adjustment, decision making, pressure. Um,
Yes.
mhm,
So you shared a little bit, saying you talked about, some of your own mental health challenges. And so I'm just, wondering, being on changing horses, deciding you're gonna go on a new track, and of all the fields to choose, psychology, the one of the most widest mainstream
mm,
sciences sciences and fields you can go into. Um,
right.
what was that like for you, not really having a Black or Afrocentric, framework, a lens, and probably not even very many mentors to help you on this new journey? How did that affect you mentally?
Well, what's interesting is I actually have two responses to that. So, as an undergrad, I went to USC, right? Just predominantly white, very prestigious, elitist, if you will, university. Although I love being a Trojan, so I don't want to down talk my people being alum of that university. But being a psychology undergraduate there was very traditional, quote unquote, if you will, very Western focused in terms of strategies for learning about research or about therapy or clinical work. Um, and so that experience was pretty isolating. There weren't that many of us on the campus, and then very few of us who were in the psychology department. And so it was something again that felt like it was aligned with what I wanted to do and what I was beginning to learn. And yet, I also felt pretty alone in the process. Thankfully, however, I was able to get connected with this program, this honors program in psychology. And my mentor was a Latino male professor. And so I was able to do some undergraduate research with him. And so there was some sense of connection that I felt, which was really helpful. Um, and then the benefit for me was when I went to grad school. My mentor, my nana, as I refer to her now, is a African centered psychologist by the name of Dr. Linda James Myers, and she was at Ohio State, the Ohio State University, where I was doing my graduate work. And so while the department as a whole, the counseling psychology department was all white. She was in the clinical psychology department. I was able to get an alignment and some connection and some support from her. And so, again, it was a somewhat similar experience to being at USC, where it was predominantly white and very, again, mainstream in approaches. For example, language today, we talk about like evidence based therapy and treatments and things that are more aligned with general, typical psychology, if you will. But her knowledge and understanding and connection to the Association of Black Psychologists was part of my journey, my experience. So it was doing both, right? Doing the traditional, yes, let me go ahead and get my PhD and I got to do what these folks tell me I need to do. But I'm also going to be connected with Black psychologists and do my own kind of learning and reading and be mentored in a way that allows me to kind of walk in both worlds, if you will.
Mm. Mhm. Yes. So many of us have to direct our own studies, especially at the master's degree level when we are looking to be Afrocentric in our studies, especially in our thesis. We literally have to educate ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
we have to read the books that are required to read, and then we have to read the books that we require, our soul requires us to read. And then we have to do the hard work of integrating that to make that valuable in the mainstream. And so, we
Mhm.
when we graduate with a master's degree, we really have 2 master's degrees.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, we've done the work of 2 degrees. Yeah. I just sorry I had flashbacks.
It can be kind of traumatic. I understand. It's a process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So tell me, so you're on going down this timeline just a little bit. You're
Sure.
on this track. You're working with you're being mentored by a clinical psychologist. Your teachers are white folk. How at what point and I don't know if how is the right question, but at what point did the integration start to manifest of social justice and spiritual work with the healing work? How did or mental health work? How did that begin to morph into one approach and one work and one practice?
Well, it definitely wasn't this linear process, right? Not like step one, step two, step three. Like here I am. It's been a winding journey, and yet at some level also feels like a part of what I've always known, a remembering of sorts of the truth and how to live and be and show up in the world that supports everyone, but is very connected to our experience as Black people. And so, as I look at my professional life, if you will, I don't know that this exactly answers your question, but it is what's coming forward for me.
Hmm.
Is this awareness? So, I was describing how I went to Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio, for my graduate work, my master's and my PhD, which was I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was very felt to me because I was coming from LA at that time, very rural, not very diverse, small townish. It was quite an adjustment. And then, as I was mentioning, being at Ohio State was its own experience. So I made some intentional decisions. Like I mentioned, I was part of ABPSI, Association of Black Psychologists. I was actually doing my, excuse me, my master's thesis, my dissertation were related to Linda James Myers, her theories around Afrocentric psychology. So I was, again, trying to, at that time, blending both of those things. And I made a decision. So when you finish your doctorate in counseling psychology or clinical psychology, you have to do an internship. So similar to how medical doctors have to get certain hours and residency and so forth, there is a experience as psychologists where you have to spend a year doing a pre-doctoral internship and then a full-time kind of experience. And then afterwards, when you finish your degree, where you do a 3,500 or a year-long postdoctoral uh, fellowship or residency. And so when I knew that I was ready to leave Ohio State, I had finished all my academic work and my dissertation, and it was time to go on my pre-doctoral internship. I was like, I want to go to where some Black people are. Right. I made this very conscious decision because you can apply to anywhere nationally to try to get a placement to do your hours. And so I was looking at DC, I was looking at Atlanta. I was, again, really specific about it was time for me to be with my people, and was able to do an internship at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And having only visited there before, and I haven't been there in years and years and years, but it was like heaven. But everywhere I looked, there was Black people, right, at all levels of kind of influence, right, from government to churches to county workers to just people, and it was just a very fulfilling experience for me to be there and to have that experience. I was only there a year, but and would have loved to stayed, but job opportunities weren't opening up for me at that time.
Mhm.
So anyway, I was very connected at that point with my people, with the work. It was very clear. And then from there, I went to UC Davis, just referring to that, and had about 20 years where I was working on campus. I did a number of things. Again, I had to, as a university employee, to work with everyone, and yet I was very intentional as well about creating groups specifically for Black women or for Black men and women. It was called initially Brothers and Sisters because I had a male co facilitator. And when he left, I did a group just called Sister to Sister. I worked and actually taught in African American studies for a number of years. I taught a psychology of the African American experience. And then in my role as the associate director of the counseling center, helped to support a program that really connected students of color with resources that may not have necessarily been clinically or psychology related, but that would allow them to bypass some of the stigma and some of the concerns about receiving culturally relevant and support to go where they could get it. So, having liaisons who were working in the Cross Cultural Center, having liaisons who were therapists, but they would work in the LGBT center or that would work in Latino studies. And so trying to do this approach that allowed BIPOC students, students of color, marginalized students to get what they needed in a way that might really fit with them rather, again, than the more traditional routes of you got to sit in this room and talk with somebody one on one for 45 minutes and that you may not know or trust or feel comfortable with. So I'll kinda stop there because I feel like I've, gone on and on and on, but that's some of the history of how I have been doing, and I'm sure I'll share more about Safe Black Space shortly, but what I was doing and what kind of brought me to this integration, this marriage between mental health, Black mental health, cultural kind of issues, and introducing this idea of spirituality or that we are spirit beings, right? And in psychology, traditional psychology, there's this real separation often between religion, spirituality, psychology. They're seen as quite different, and yet I see them as very interrelated.
Absolutely. So eager to hear how those that the polyamorous marriage came about. Um, when I think about all that you're doing, and I think, okay, so she took a traditional practice and made it a community process.
Mhm.
So she took it out of the individual practice, first of all. She took it out of the personal, the individual. So no practice, no individuality, but more community and process and relationship. And so that's
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I feel like you just dismantled, all of the major concepts of psychology and said, "Ah, out the door with that." And we're gonna recreate that. And so I do want to hear, how how you threw out things and brought in new things. So you brought in the spirituality and not just the spirituality in however a person might identify that, but very specifically on Afrocentric spirituality and how
Mhm.
that works personally, spiritually, and mentally for the
Sure.
healing of our people. And so I you can take as long as you would like I- to tell us.
Okay.
I think that that's the most interesting part of your journey is how you've integrated all of this and
Mm.
threw away all the traditional stuff and
Mm.
created this new beautiful pr- process of community that is
Sure.
spiritual healing and liberating and all of that. So please tell us why,
Okay.
how you knew that was the way. At what point did you recognize,
Sure.
you need to begin to integrate this and you need to throw this away, and how you could sense that that was the beginning of a type of freedom and healing that specifically the would
Mhm.
work in Black community.
Sure. Well, thank you for giving me the liberty to just talk at length because I've been doing this work now for a good 30-ish years. And so there's a lot that's coming forth as you are asking the question. And so what I will start with is going back to my comments around African centered psychology. And I didn't necessarily say this as explicitly as I will now, but this idea that reverberates within African centered psychology is that we are spiritual beings, like at our core, at our essence, and our ancestors knew that, and that we are showing up in these physical bodies, but we are so much more than that. And that part of what our ancestors knew and did was they lived in a community way. That the self, this individual self, is so much bigger than just me, than just Kristee. That it's connected to my ancestors, it's connected to nature, it's connected to God, it's connected to those that are yet unborn. And so there's this reality that I have experienced that all of that is what makes me me and what makes you you. And but we've been hoodwinked, we've been socialized in such a way that teaches us to be much more individualized in our focus, more putting our value on external things, to value material things, capitalism, money, cars, right? How much education I have, how I look, all of that. And so, as I said earlier, it was like I was remembering things that I knew that I may not have been able to give voice to. So, I'm gonna hop back to UC Davis for a while. So, when I first got to UC Davis, I was very young. I was 26, straight out of grad school, straight out of finishing my pre-doctoral internship, moved there from Atlanta, So I was African centered, Black, just showing up fully as me, doing the work. And yet, part of being in that system for almost 20 years really dampened some of my light, some of my outspokenness. The director at the time was a middle aged, older white male who was very, I don't want to badmouth him, but who was not as open to diversity issues. Those folks who might talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And
Mhm.
like, well, I hired you, right? I believe in diversity because we have the staff, right? We got some diversity here. But when it really came down to the doing the things or silencing what felt like silencing my voice or that kind of thing. And um, so it's interesting to see that the path, because I really felt like I was starting to be quieter. I stopped teaching
Mhm.
the class of African American studies. There's pushback around, well, how are you going to have a group just for Black women? And so there was a point, however, when it just became very clear, like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Um, the center at that point was merging with the student health center. So this model of being very medicalized, again, things that didn't feel congruent with people of color and Black folks around. We got to collect records on every single person, and you have to do this particular way of assessing. And I was like, you're putting us in a box. And so again, at that point, there wasn't language around DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or community centered kind of health or work. But I knew that was the right thing. I knew those were the right things. And so I remember even doing workshops again for like Black History Month or whatever. I remember one of my titles was "Come Back to the Center."
Mhm.
Um, and with this idea of come back to like, who we are, right? And so I had to be somewhat careful on a university campus. I couldn't talk as explicitly about spirituality or right, and yet that's the work that I was doing. And so anyway, I eventually left the university. I decided that I was feeling too boxed in, and for a while moved, worked with another nonprofit, and basically the unfolding of my current organization called Safe Black Space really occurred out of the unfortunate tragic killing of Stephon Clark here in Sacramento in 2018. For folks who may not know that experience, he was a 23-year-old Black man who was shot and killed in his grandmother's backyard. He was shot at 20 times, and 8 bullets hit him and killed him while he was holding a cell phone. And our city just erupted, as many others have, after the tragic and unfortunate police violence and killings of our people. And for me at that time, um, it felt like a calling. It felt like a wake up call to apply many of the things that I had already been doing, whether it was at UC Davis or whether it was in my other position doing community healing circles, to really bring it home, bring it to this backyard here in Sacramento. And the circles themselves are for us, by us, Black people, to really identify ways that we can take care of ourselves, take care of each other in a world that is not designed to support us, where there is constant racism and oppression, discrimination, anti Blackness that can show up in our lives and impact us in so many different ways. So, we incorporate strategies for caring for ourselves, activities, tools people can use. We always integrate aspects of spirituality, for example, pouring libation and honoring our ancestors. Um, and again, create a space where we can just be. A couple of people have said, and I hope no one gets offended, but as Black people, I think we can get it, where one woman has said it's a place where you can just go and take your wig off, right? Like, less in our hair, but literally you could just do that. And someone else said it's a place you can go and just take your bra off, right? And again, as Black women, like, and there's, I'm sure, analogies for men, but where you can just breathe. You
Yes.
can just breathe and you can just be.
So tell me, so all of these things coming are birthing inside of you, how did they shape into safe black spaces? How did that
Mm.
how did that manifest?
How did Safe Black Space come out? Well, so after leaving UC Davis, I mentioned that I was working for another nonprofit in Sacramento, and what we were doing at the time was work across the state related to behavioral health issues. So mental health, in addition to addiction or substance use issues. I was part of a health equity team, and we were really focused on different projects. So one of the things I was doing at that time was supporting Black LGBT churches and creating like peer counseling programs. Right, we know that Black folks and folks who may be lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, that there's risk factors that may be present for depression or suicide, and so I was helping to across the state to connect with churches so that they could create counseling programs to support each other. Another aspect of what I was doing was across the state, there are 58 counties, and every county has to have a cultural competency plan or ways in which they're trying to ensure that the people in their county get the services that they need and deserve, whether it's language, whether it's related to, again, strategies or competencies that may serve them in a way that would be helpful and productive. And one of the other things I was doing was working with the Association of Black Psychologists and the Community Healing Network to train Black people across the state in what are called emotional emancipation circles, which are similar to the Safe Black Space. And part of what emerged out of that statewide work was we were doing, and I was doing, helping to support that training back when, I'm sure you'll remember this, when Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were killed back to back.
Mhm.
It was like one night, I can't remember the exact flow, but I think Alton Sterling was killed one day, and then the next morning you woke up and we heard about Philando Castile and his daughter being in the car, and just all the things that were happening. At that same time, Trump had made some like within a week, Trump had made the comments around, the protester who had been killed by the driver and the tiki torch Nazi white supremacists and saying, "Oh, there's good people on both sides." And so it was just this converging of just madness that was happening in our
Madness is the right word.
madness, right? And so anyway, the folks that I was working with, collaborating with, we created a toolkit. It was a Black racial trauma cultural healing toolkit that we wanted to give the folks that were doing these circles so that they could support their communities with what was happening. And so that was very helpful. Well, you fast forward to 2018, which was maybe a couple years later, a year and a half. I can't remember again timeline wise. Might have just been the next year, but that's when Stephon Clark was killed. And at that time, like I was saying, our city just erupted. Kings games were shut down. The highway I-5 was closed because of protesters. Stevante Clark, who's Stefan's brother, was having a really hard time. Not surprising. Um, and it was on the media. City council meetings were kind of overtaken, and so it was a lot. And 2 things kinda happened simultaneously. One was, the member of the family of the Clark family or someone very connected to them was like, "Where are the mental health professionals? Like, what is going on? Like, where are our people? We need help." And at that same time, my one of my other mentors who helped to develop this toolkit, this racial toolkit was like, "Kristee, you okay out there?" And I was like, "No, there's a lot going on." She's like, you need to just take that toolkit and apply it in Sacramento. The ancestors will be pleased. You will get everything that you need to do the work." And I was like, "She's right." And so I ended up connecting with my minister at the time and some other community leaders and said, "Let's do something." So within 2 weeks, I guess I would say, of the, killing of, Stephon Clark, brought together, I don't even remember how many, maybe 10 to 15, Black people, some of whom were therapists, clinicians, some were educators, faith leaders, community folks, and said, "Let's do a circle." So did a mini training at that time, put it out there on social media as well as in the larger media, posted flyers, just got the word out, and people showed up for their first Safe Black Space Community Healing Circle. And it was powerful. People talked about they didn't know that's what they needed, but they needed to be there. And then they said, "Well, when's the next circle?" I said, "Okay, well, let's do one next month, right?" So then we did one the next month, and had a number of people turn out and talk about how helpful it was to kind of just be a landing space for what was happening in our city at that time. And then, okay, the next month, well, when's the next one? So I never intended, to be quite honest, to start a nonprofit called Safe Black Space. It just, again, felt like this natural unfolding need that I always knew was there, right? Because remember back at UC Davis, I was doing brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So it has just grown from there. And we are now 7.5 years old.
Wow. It's amazing. I still find it amazing, or miraculous, whatever
Mhm.
word I use, that when you rest into who you are here to be,
Yeah.
being who you are here to be, all your needs are met.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Things happen.
Yeah.
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 Just amazing.
Mhm.
So the birth of safe Black spaces, I like how you drew the picture that starts, way early on in your learnings and your challenges,
Mhm. Right.
in your times of freedom and oppression, um,
Mhm.
but how all that morphed together, at the right time and space for Black spaces to be created. Um,
Yeah.
so so tell me, you know, I'm wondering, and I hope other people are wondering, the Black church is a powerful entity. I imagine, at least I know, when I do personal counseling and coaching, I run up against this all the time. When as you the statement you made, I love that, come back to the center, to who you are.
Mhm.
Mm. When I try to ground that in Afrocentric terms and Black African experience and heritage and all of that, so many people over the years have not been able to embrace even the concept that road to freedom, because they had this other road to freedom that was
Mm.
described by the Black church, or by the church in general, but very specifically the Black church. That was just the opposite of that. Not only opposite of that, but negated all of that and made it evil. And so I'm just wondering, how has that been for you and for Black spaces? I just imagine that it's a lot of work having to navigate that, having to meet people where they are and offer them liberation that is sometimes contradictory to what they have known as liberation.
Right. Ooh, so at least I'm gonna start, then I'm gonna circle back around to your response,
Okay.
because what comes up for me in this very moment is the fact, again, that our ancestors were very connected to their spirituality. And so I've had the opportunity to visit Egypt and to see the hieroglyphs and to understand even how, like, the Ten Commandments are a version of what is really called the virtues of Mayat, right? And the principles around justice and harmony and reciprocity and all these things that we might see in versions of interpretations of the Bible or Christianity, if you will. I also have been to recently to Accra, to Ghana, just a few months ago. I've been to Tanzania last year, and have seen as well, both on the east coast of Africa and the west coast of Africa, in terms of our enslavement process and uh, our enslavers and the slave dungeons in which they held us, and can, in my mind, picture the unfortunate reality of how our white captors would have churches right above these inhumane, torturous dungeons in which we may have survived long enough to then be on a boat that would bring us to the US or wherever we may have landed. And so I guess I just encourage people to understand religion in a bigger, broader sense, that there's lots of aspects to it. I believe as well, and you may have been alluding to this, that many of us have experienced church hurt in the sense of receiving messaging that may have been incongruent with our realities or our identities or how we were living in the world, and that's hard to live with and unpack. I remember, again, I mentioned that I grew up in Christian schools, right? Kindergarten, private Christian schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I remember we had chapel on Wednesday mornings. I remember when I was in kindergarten, maybe first grade. I don't think kindergartners went to chapel because we were only there half day. But I remember they would have basically like an altar call every week, right? They'd have a little message and there'd be some singing, and then you come on down. And I remember thinking, like, wait a minute. What do you mean that people who don't believe in Jesus are going to hell? My little brain couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm like, if this God really loves all the children, then how? And literally, I remember thinking, what about the children in Africa? That's right. The motherland who may not have been exposed to this, and they're going to hell too. So just interesting as that 5 or 6 year old to have that level of questioning, and yet I'm sure had I verbalized that out loud in that situation, it would have been major repercussions for doing so, right? So I just kept it in my little brain, but wondered all along. And so to get to your question about how Safe Black Space responds to all the stories, all the history, all the relationships within the Black church is by being as transparent and open as I am with you around the fact that we are not a religious organization, or we're not promoting any particular religious beliefs, but we do believe that they are, and we each are, beautiful spiritual beings, that can show up exactly as they are, and, that we invite them to consider, some of the things that may be introduced as it relates to that way of thinking and believing. And, what I'll close with in my comments to your question are that, it's not for everybody, right? That there's some few people over the years who have been like, I don't know about this, right? And they may choose not to return, and others who are open to the experience. And I say this thing, and I'll make another quick announcement. I'm reminded of the Harriet Tubman quote where, she's alleged to have said, because 'cause I've heard it in different ways, but, she's basically says, "I freed 1,000 slaves, and I would have freed 1,000 more if they knew that they were slaves." And just, again, that as a metaphor, if you will, of, sometimes we're just not in a position, to be able to understand that we may be limited in certain ways, and that's not to say that religion is limiting. There's a lot of power in us and in the Black church and beliefs. But
It is both
when we
limiting and liberating.
exactly right. So anyway, and then the last thing I will say, just related to this, again, I love that we're talking about Linda James Myers, my mentor. We were just texting earlier today, by the way. But we are doing with Safe Black Space. She has a number of books that she has written, and one of them is called Blessed Assurance, Deep Thought and Meditations in the Tradition and Wisdom of Our Ancestors. And
Mm.
it is a 52-week um, meditation and um, comments and thoughts around our African ancestors and their knowing of spirituality. And so this year, Safe Black Space has been engaging with her in a weekly meditation and book study group that we do on Wednesday evenings. And where every week we've been focusing on a different kind of meditation and just learning together and having her do some interpretation of her intentions of that meditation. And it has been so powerful, so grounding, so insightful, and so amazing to watch. And every week is a little different, but there's usually about 20-ish people, to kind of see our journey, developmentally as we just expand our consciousness. So I'm really happy, proud, pleased to be able to have been a part of that offering as well.
So I think you mentioned that on our prep call,
Mhm,
and somewhere it's probably on my one of my many book lists to get to.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but I do want to get to it. So yeah, so I brought up the challenge between Black Christian theology and spirituality. Well, one because it's real,
mhm,
and I think it's probably the first line of defense for people who actually want help. The first line of defense is, "But this is what the Bible says," or this is what I know to be true."
yeah,
Um, and my dissertation was actually on child exposure to domestic violence in the home. Um,
mm,
but I did a whole section on suffering. um,
yeah,
just because that theme runs throughout families, families of faith who are also living with violence. And so over the years, what I've noticed is that I'm not going to say I know, but what I've heard, experienced, uh,
mhm,
is that most of the, not most, I don't want to measure because that's not what I mean to do, but very frequently, what I hear people, when I listen to people tell me their stories of suffering, is grounded in something that they believe is true, but doesn't work for them.
mm,
They believe that thing is right and there's no changing that. And it's trying to live into that belief or what
mm,
they think is true, um, is is what really makes them suffer
mm,
mentally, emotionally. And over the years, it's been so hard, whether I'm talking about working with survivors of domestic violence, adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, or what have you. It's
mm,
always been so difficult to help, I want to say women, because that's mostly what I work with, women release themselves from what they believe was truth in order to set themselves free
yeah,
and stop their suffering. But
mhm,
in the wonderful instances where I experienced over a lot of time where women, especially women who were trying to stay in their marriage, trying to heal their marriage and want a healing for their partner, didn't want to lose the marriage or their partner. They wanted to find a way to heal their family, wanted to find out what's going on, how can we fix that. Those women who stuck in the work for a long time,
mhm,
just always so wonderful to see them arrive at a place where they could say, "Oh, this truth is holding me hostage. This thing I believe that is truth is holding me hostage. My pain and suffering is not because of what my partner's doing or what it is I cannot do. It's all because I believe in my expectations and my life work every day is trying to accomplish this thing, be in alignment with this thing that I now know is not true. It's not my truth.
mhm,
And this to witness and to witness that freedom, to see people set free from that suffering, for me has always just been like the beginning of a healthy mind,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
especially for Black folk. I just, yeah,
Yeah.
we've been held hostage by so much stuff that we think is right and true.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. There's a lot in terms of our belief systems, what we hold on to that can truly limit us. And that liberation and the freedom comes when we're able to kind of break free of those or to see that there's an alternate experience or reality that we can tap into.
Yeah.
And you were saying, well, yeah, just how difficult it is in particular to work with trauma survivors or people who are in abusive relationships, particularly because there's a lot of, I'm gonna call it game playing, right? There's a cycle of violence and this thing that happens that is it is prone to keep people connected into situations that really don't serve them. And so I admire you for the patience and the work and the support that you've been able to provide to people who may be, moving through that or living through that. And what you we haven't brought up yet either, but as it relates to mental health and religion, that one of the things, this is so true, is people will say, well, just pray about it, right? Like if you got an issue, you got a problem, just take it to God, right? Or there's can be these beliefs that maybe you're not as strong as a person of faith if you are having problems, right? Whether it's mental health or in your relationship with your kids, and so that can be hard to unpack. And what we also see in the literature is that when Black people are quote unquote struggling or having a hard time, that instead of seeking therapy, we will go to our church, our pastor, our priest, our faith leader, or we'll go oftentimes we'll show up at the ER or we'll get medical treatment. And so again, there's this big stigma around maybe getting mental health support or counseling or coaching. And I get it. I totally get it. But we will go to the church. Uh,
I remember when I was in graduate school, one of my mentors, who also pastored here in the Bay Area and was on the board of the seminary that I was attending. I don't remember what we were talking about, but just a beloved pastor, teacher, professor
mm,
in the world of Black theology, and white folk love him too. But he said to me one day in his deep, slow voice, he said, Elise, in the church holds, the congregation holds the pastor hostage just as much as the pastor holds the congregation hostage.
mm,
And he didn't say it anything like I just said it. When he said it, I heard his pain and his love. I heard both of them so blended together, how real that statement was for him and how important in that moment it was that he would tell me that deep, I
mhm.
think what he thought was just a very deep and sacred truth.
Yes.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And so all of that to say that, when we talk about pastors and spiritual leaders being most
Mhm.
often the first line of response
Absolutely.
to survivors of violence, of trauma, especially in our community. Yeah.
And they need their support, they need, outlets, they need training, and that goes
Right.
back to a bit of what I was saying earlier that I mean, I didn't go into this depth, but this idea that folks go to, again, their faith leader, their minister, their pastor, their reverend, often first. And then those folks may not have much of a clue about how to support or what to do besides sometimes pray, right? Or take it to a particular biblical connection, which again, there can be power in that, but there's lots of limitations as well. So I've done some consulting and some supporting of Black churches out here in Sacramento, and that's one of the ministers I just had some contact with. Ironically, at least they were doing their great church, very active here in Sacramento, and they were doing a domestic violence forum. And their senior pastor was there the entire time. I was a keynote, and we were talking about survivors and what they can do and how to support each other. And that was one of the things that they asked about was, "Can you talk about, religion and violence and what it says and doesn't say about, right, staying with your partner and how God condemns violence?" And he was someone who said, I don't know what to do when people come to me." And I just really honor his, transparency and then their willingness to say, "As a church community, we wanna address this." So
I remember years ago, a white pastor somewhere in the Midwest said to me after I did a training, he said, with tears in his eyes, he said, I want you to know I hear you. He said, but I can't, my plate runs over with just trying to support and care for my congregation from what
Mhm.
I know to do.
Okay.
He said, and now you're talking about me learning how to do something no, do something else to be aware and then
Mhm.
how to respond. He said, I don't know where would I have space for that. He said I'm going to be spending most of my time, he's quote unquote, sitting on somebody else's couch if I try to put one more thing on my plate. Yeah. And I told him, I said, I'm grateful that, that this is your truth and that you could speak it out loud.
Yeah.
And the reality is that one, you should be on somebody's couch every week anyway.
Yep. Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and two, this is not for the senior pastor. This
Yeah.
this is work is for the associate pastors and for ministry leaders, but the pastor has to co-sign it. The pastor has to be willing to say, these things are not right. This is not what the Bible says, blah, 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 blah. This is not the right interpretation. You don't deserve these things to happen to you. And this is a safe place for you to get help. And then it's the associate and the other spiritual leaders who should be trained on then how to be first line responders. And they should only be to a small degree first line responders. Their main job is to know who the best resources are to connect people with in the outer community. Yeah. And so,
Absolutely. You
his eyes just lit up, the little white guy. He was just like, "Really? So then you can help train the church, that you can help train my leaders, and so my church can become like, yep, now you got it. Now you got it. You remember always, you're the leader. You're not the practitioner. You're the leader." So, and all of that just to say that, often that truth is magnified with Black churches, where Black leaders, Black pastors are doing 1,000 different things, working a
Mhm.
full-time job, and pastoring a church,
Yeah.
and doing pastoral care and counseling, just doing so much. And so to talk about trauma that's going on in the family and community, and to how they might be aware of that, and be their church might be a front line, is just it
Mhm.
seems like an impossibility. For yeah, yeah. And so, one of the things I think those of us who work, around or work with agencies who provide services for individuals and communities that experience trauma is to help our religious leaders, especially our Black pastors, know that we're not asking them to become advocates in that regards. In that
Mm.
regards, we're asking them to be spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
breast. We should
Mhm.
be spiritual leaders, and to make sure that your is communicated that your church is a safe place for survivors.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know how we got there. Um,
You're
yeah,
talking about spirituality and
and Black theology and all of that, and how that gets mixed up together. So yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I was just so curious, and my assumption was that it would be very difficult work for you and your staff or the team, to meet people where they are and try to bring them along.
Yeah. Yeah, and and like I said, we incorporate spirituality into the work that we do, but we don't lead with that.
Yeah.
Just how at the start I didn't lead with I'm a spiritual person, right? And yet there's an experience, hopefully, that people have, and they do with Safe Black Space, where it does feel like you are home, that you are safe, that you are loved, that you are right, which are all the the virtues, yes, of Ma'at, but of spirituality of most churches, is like that's again, we don't wanna just talk about it, we wanna be about it. And so I think that helps with not there not being a huge, resistance to the conversations that we might have or the things that we do.
So as we start to wrap this up, I have 3 important questions. I'm not sure that we can get to all 3 of them. Um,
Okay. Let's see what we can get to. What you
let's
got?
see what we can do. So if someone listening to this podcast, knows of someone very close to them who's struggling with self-harming behavior, what do you recommend that person do?
Well, so 2 responses, right? If you know someone that may be harming themselves, so you are witnessing, watching, observing, noticing, in a loved one or a friend or someone you care about, I think one of the first things that you can do is let them know that you're there. Right? When someone may be struggling with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, trauma, violence, that it may be somewhat shameful for them. It may be difficult for them to talk about or to acknowledge. And so, minimally opening the door, like, hey, I care about you. I notice maybe you haven't been quite yourself, or I'm concerned, or if you ever want to talk, or right. And depending on how severe that self-harm or that injury might be, you could call it out like, "Gosh, I noticed that you have some scratches on your forearm, and you wanna tell me a little bit about how you got those or, where those came from or what's going on?" But the again, first approach is just letting them know you care, that you are there, and that you are willing to talk with them and not being afraid of what you might hear. I think the other thing for that person to do is to also think about, similar to how you were talking about, providing some of our ministers, our church leaders with resources. So that person may want to look into, well, what are some mental health resources that are local to where I live or I stay? Or, out here we have 288, which is a kind of number that you can call to find resources. And so that you are maybe prepared or ready to respond if they start pouring out their heart, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is going on and I don't know what to do. And that you can be with them to help them find what they might need. If, on the other hand, you are that person who may be engaging in self harm, and what do we mean by self harm? Could be anything, right? There are traditional ways of thinking about it. Might be someone that cuts themselves or that burns themselves, but it can also be, right, if we want to take it literally, like drinking yourself to death, right? Or driving at crazy high speeds while intoxicated, or putting yourself in situations where you could be harmed. So doing a bit of a self check about what am I doing or engaging in that might be hurting me. And then at the start, just trying to understand, what's that about? Is there a pattern? Do I always do this? Yeah, as a youth, right? Whenever my dad gets on me or, is criticizing me and I feel like I can't control situations, but beginning to unpack what's going on, what am I doing? And then who can I go to? So it kind of goes back to where it just started, with where or who is that trusted person or persons that might be willing to just hear me out, to be with me through this, to help me find support. And that sometimes can be the faith leader, right? That we were just discussing. It could be for a younger person, maybe it's a teacher or a coach. For others of us, it might be our sister friends or our mother, or sometimes even our daughters, right? That we might have a relationship that goes both ways. Sometimes we think as mothers, I have 24 and 25-year-old daughters, and so they are adulting, right? But sometimes we may feel like we don't wanna burden somebody, and yet that reciprocal relationship is important. So, being willing to ask for help, going to people that you trust, and then that may mean too, um, like I said earlier, it might be someone in the medical field. Right, being willing to open up when you may be in conversation and the nurse asks or the physician's assistant says, "Is there anything, any violence that's happening in your home or anything that, is going on for you in terms of your mental health?" Being honest on little questionnaires and assessments that you might get at a doctor's office so that again, people can help. So I think those would be my immediate thoughts about how to potentially respond on, both sides of the coin.
And then, what is one fundamental truth you could share with a Black woman who is, I'm gonna say maybe what she's thinking is that no one loves her.
Mhm.
Um, and and for me, I would break that down and say that she thinks that she's not seen, she's not valued, she's not wanted.
So, although I no longer am doing private therapy, because I'm doing more community work and teaching and other things, consulting, training. What comes up for me is my therapist hat, my psychologist hat, that wants to say to her that I know how hard that must be, right? And I appreciate you sharing with me that you don't seem to feel as though you are seen or loved or valued. And as you sit here with me, I see you, I respect you, I honor who you are, whatever it is that you've been through that got you to this place. And I believe that you can get through this onto the other side, and that we often get messages that may somehow communicate to us that we are not worthy, or we're not beautiful, or we're not smart. And they're all lies. They are all lies because you are beautiful and capable and worthy of everything that your heart desires. So let's figure out how to help you believe that for yourself. Yeah.
Yes. So for the sisters that listen to this podcast, I want you to know those words are to you, about you, and they're also for you to share with your sisters. We
Sure.
we all need the mirror back, the love that we know that is there, that we sometimes don't feel or think that it's there, that it's true, but that it is.
Mhm.
My last question:
Yes.
if people want to support safe Black spaces, whether they want to volunteer or they want to give, they want to help you with fundraising or any of that, how can people, who should they connect with? I'm hoping that it's not you. I'm hoping that it's somebody else. Just because I'm hoping that's one more hat you don't have to wear. But who do they have? Who can they connect with? And how do they connect?
Sure. Absolutely. So before I get there, I want to make sure I talk about the full offerings of what we do because we
Yes.
tapped on a couple of them. And then I'll tell you and tell your listeners how they can tap into Safe Black Space. So, um, our main service activity is our community healing circles. So, those circles, like I mentioned before, are designed by us and for us to get the medicine that we need to keep thriving in a world right now that may not be as supportive as we might need or want. And we offer those online on second Saturdays of each month from 3 to 5 p.m. And again, what's amazing is people can, again, reach out and connect with us from anywhere. We just had a circle this past Saturday. We had some people from the Sacramento area, from LA. I think someone was from Chicago, and there was a woman that was tuning in from London, and it was, like, midnight her time, and she
Wow.
was still trying to be with us. So, we do our community healing circles online on second Saturdays, 3 to 5. Every few months or so, we also will do in-person circles, like half-day retreats, if you will, usually in February for Black History Month, in June for Juneteenth, and then we had one, earlier in October of this month. Um so we do those. We also do, as I mentioned, this meditation and book study group. Again, that's online, and so people from all over the states actually participate in that. That's on Wednesdays from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. We also do African drum circles. So we are part of a collaborative here in Sacramento. There's a few other Black organizations that on second Sundays from 4 to 6 p.m. We get people together, we have extra drums and percussion instruments and just drum. Drum itself is a total healing strategy. Yesterday, I have a little video that, I took of the folks some of the folks that were there. It's from youth, young ones, like 3-year-old, 4-year-olds that are drumming up to, like, seniors and elders that are drumming and teens, and so it's really fabulous, and I was there yesterday, so I'm feeling all the good effects from the drum circle in addition to the healing circle that we had on Saturday. I kinda joke, but it's true. It's like second weekends are healing weekends for Black people. Those are ways that we also do the work. Um, in addition, we do other events a couple times a year that where we open up to the larger, broader community. We do a Kwanzaa, a Kutoa, which in Swahili means giving. The Kwanzaa Kutoa, a celebration in January, the first Saturday of every year. In the afternoon, we host an in-person Kwanzaa event, which is really special. We actually invite nominations of Black individuals or families in the Sacramento region who exemplify a principle of Nguzu Saba, so one of the principles of Kwanzaa, and we select one honoree for each principle. So someone who might be representing purpose or collective work and responsibility or faith, and we honor them. We honor them with gifts, financial gifts, Kwanzaa kits, food, gift certificates, just things that really celebrate who they are. And then we also have a Kwanzaa ceremony at that time and have drumming and dancing, African drumming and dancing, and food and a feast and giveaway gifts to our the attendees. And we do raffle prizes. So it's a is a whole deal. And then we also do a gala. So we are, like many organizations, experiencing some financial challenges, to be real, with our current administration and the climate right now. And so we are really um, appreciative of any fundraising or donations that people offer to help us continue to do what we do at this point at no cost to community members. And so we do an anniversary gala in April or May of each year. And so, and then the final thing I will say is we do lots of outreach, tabling. We will go to community fairs, to local high schools, and just try to get the word out about what we do to do some education about the importance of supporting our community. So that's all the things, probably more, but those are the things that we do. And if people want to tap in, the easiest way is to go to our website, which is Safe Black Space. So safeblackspace.org. And there, we try to keep it up to date. We have an events calendar and flyers and registration links for how to get connected. There's a donation page. Right now, there's information listed about our Kwanzaa event and nominations that people can make. You can submit your information if you would like more information. And we typically do, I mean, we're always grateful, like I said, for donations. We're always grateful for people to come and participate. We are welcoming folks who may want to volunteer at different levels. So we may have people who just come and show up and help volunteer at our Kwanzaa events, or people who may help out at our gala, or may, participate in setting up events at our outreach or that kind of thing. But we do have a kind of formal, training experience and certification that we have our facilitators of our healing circles go through, so that they're just all on the same page around the work that we do, some of the understanding of African-centered psychology and its application to the circles, that they have a sense of how to manage, crises that may come up in the circle. And we typically do those once, maybe twice a year, and we're actually doing a training, mid-November, November 14th and 15th. So maybe a while before we do another one. But if you go to our website, you can find out how to reach us. And yes, the contact would be me. Anything that is submitted there, in terms of, information that you might seek on the website would come to me to address. We have a very small shop here at Safe Black Space. Despite all the things we do, we're primarily a volunteer-run organization. So I am a staff member. We have a program manager and a student half-time student intern. So a lot of that does fall on me, and so I'm trying to be consistently mindful about self-care and taking breaks and unplugging, and because, I love the work that I do, but it's draining and it can be difficult. But, as I shared at the circle on Saturday, it's like I'm pouring out, but I'm also drinking. I'm getting poured into by this work, but it's also critical that I, unplug at times. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Kristee. It is so important when we do the work that we love, that we're passionate about, that we're here for, to still set boundaries even there. It's so easy to slip into self-harm, meaning not getting enough rest, not eating well, not getting any exercise, not getting a
Mm,
time to place to rest your mind, not being able to have outside activities with friends and family.
mm.
All those things are so important still to balance, even when we're doing the work that we're passionate about and that we know that we're here to do. Still
Yeah,
requires a boundary.
that's right. And that's part of how we got a chance to meet
Yes.
early in the summer, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the thing. Mhm.
Yeah, we took some time and went to Ghana,
Yes, we did.
had a life-changing time. I'm still
Absolutely.
talking about it.
Me too. Me too. No, let me thank you first. Thank you for the invitation, right? Just to be with you, to share, to hear as well about your journey and to know the positive impact that you are having with our sisters out there as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Christie. Thank you for all that you continue to do. Thank you, first of all, for staying steadfast on your journey, though there were obstacles all along the way.
Hmm.
Thank you for being steadfast. And then thank you for the incredible work that you're doing in Sacramento. I pray a shield of protection be around you always, and that the prosperity of this world be poured into your life.
I receive all of that and more.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So until the next time,
All right. Thanks, Elise.
thank you, darling. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to share your story, your wisdom, your strategies for change, please email me at blackwomentalkingback@gmail.com. We're lining up panelists all the time. We're going to do some panelists, and we're going to do a lot of individual interviews. So there are a lot of sisters have written books this last couple years. I want to interview sisters who are writing their stories, who are telling their stories in book form, those who are doing new research and policy work, just our gamut, the full gamut. So if you're interested in being on the podcast, please email me and let me know. Once again, I love you all. I love you, every single one of you. I love you. Until the next time, don't forget to follow us.